Do I look like Cyril? Welcome back to the class, everyone. Galaxy of Heroes is full of teams, and a lot of them aren't going to be as good as Galactic Legend level teams. Heck, a lot of them aren't even going to be as good as Traya is on defense. But that doesn't mean they're not important. So, I realize it's not abundantly clear, but the whole purpose of this video is to be a continuation of our two previous videos where we ranked all 10 of the Galactic Legends, that is the 9 ones that have the title, plus Bane, and then we continued to rank the 10 essentially A-tier teams, and we have finally made it on our way to the B-tiered teams. Now, before we get into the overall ranking, I do have a few disclaimers where we really need to define our terms before we start labeling characters or really teams as such. So what is a B team? The first thing that I want to say, a B team is not a bad team. I feel like it kind of gets that reputation due to the fact that it's not going to be the best of the best. But that's really okay. The term B team really just implies that there are teams above it, which is the exact case. As I just previously mentioned, there are 10 Galactic Legend level teams that are above it, and then 10 A-tier teams that are also above it. So they're not bad, they're just not as good as those other ones. The second thing that I want to point out about B teams is that they are necessary. When we look at Grand Arena, you need 22 teams within Kyber. So even if you have a completely stacked roster with all the Galactic Legends, all the Conquest units, all the Legendaries, you are still going to need to pull at least 2 of these out, and that's not even taking into consideration cleanup teams or the way Datacrons may be lifting these B teams to a higher level. The third thing that I want to say, and this is kind of new, is that a lot of the B tier teams are going to be niche solutions to a Galactic Legend. I'm saying that up front because you are going to see teams here like Maldalorians, and you're going to think, Calvin, you're crazy, my Maldalorians can beat JMK. I realize that. That's really just kind of the current stage of the game due to overall power creep. And the fourth thing that I want to mention, and this is not going to be super uniform, but these teams are also typically cheaper. A Galactic Legend is going to require 15 characters or so to get. When we look at the Phoenix team, it's not exactly going to be the same ratio as overall expenses go. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into these 10 B-tier teams that you could really benefit from by building or leveraging to a greater extent. And these are not ranked in overall effectiveness, but if they were, GAC would have to be towards the top. And again, it's weird that GAC is now a B team, but that's just kind of the stage of the game. GAC can do a lot of really great things, boast with the entire 501st team. In addition to that, he can also do some other fun things if you're willing to drop Arc or Echo to add in Krex. Probably the most impressive thing that it can do is beat certain Ray comps in certain scenarios where they have really high buffs on the enemy team, allowing him to stack a lot of damage due to his leadership where it says, all 501st allies gain 2% offense until the end of the encounter when an enemy gains a buff. Cal Kestis really helps promote this. One of the things you can do in that specific Ray counter to help it go a little bit more smoothly is with Rex's form up, you can actually hold this until gas is seated. That way you don't eat 2 whirlwinds, or you're less likely to eat 2 whirlwinds back to back. The other main use for General Skywalker, at least offensively, is going to be either against Malgus teams or Queen Amidala. He doesn't have 100% win rates against those, but it's still an outside shot that he has, especially with the Queen Amidala team being so high in buffs. Again, putting Krex in versus the Queen Amidala team is really going to bolster that. I don't really love the team on defense as it just becomes susceptible to a lot of teams that aren't in the higher tiers. Like, you can use Starkiller and Seed to beat General Skywalker, but you can also just use CLS or Maul, which are, by comparison, cheaper. Next up is going to be Dark Trooper Moff Gideon. Now, Dark Trooper Moff Gideon, I oftentimes find myself using him on offense just because he has really specific anti-synergy against teams that have turn meter. So you think of something like Emperor Palpatine Starkiller that's just constantly going. They eventually just get everything they need to take them down because their stats really grow with the enemy gaining turn meter. However, a lot of people are going to find good use for them on defense, especially if you have Captain Enoch. Dark Trooper Moff Gideon's kryptonite, so to speak, when he's on defense is going to be Admiral Raddus. Admiral Radis is not 100%. And in fact, that win rate goes even lower once you put Captain Enoch in there, who's able to cleanse the exposes a lot more often. And in addition to that, he really keeps Jin from critting your team, which kind of holds the overall Rogue One team back. So again, good use on offense as well as defense, but really probably going to pull something very heavy like Bo-Katan that I often have to use against it if you're putting him on defense with the right team. Next up is going to be Phoenix. Definitely leaning towards the offensive uses here. Defensively, really doesn't hold up well. You'll have a lot of weaker teams like Tuskens that can just completely shred them because of these small amounts of turn meter they're gaining. That being said, they have a pretty good time beating the Inquisitors. And the reason for that is because the Inquisitors like to constantly give the enemy team purge. And one of the things that Krex does, without his Omicron, by the way, I do like the Omicron, but you can get this even without the Omicron, is he's going to be gaining turn meter based off the debuffs that are going out. And you can not 100% loop, but you can just get turn after turn after turn in comparison to the Inquisitors. And especially helps if he can land his days and Sabine can land her staggers to help promote that. Right now, with their current Datacron, I think they're actually doing really well versus Gungans. And even without the Datacron, they can beat some of the bad Gungan teams out there, especially the ones that don't have the Omicron that gets rid of days. That's important. If you have Gungans, you should probably have that. Next up is going to be the Fin Zori team. Probably not one of the better B teams, which is kind of crazy to say, considering how good they were even very recently. I only say that because as far as outside shots against higher teams, the only one that's really existed has been Rey, and even she has been cut out with a lot of the Datacrons that have been floating around. But overall, defensively, it holds really well. A lot of the teams that are going to beat it are actually going to be in this same tier. One of the best examples being Aphra and her droids, so definitely deserves a spot here with everything that it's doing. Speaking of Aphra, she's here with her droids. This is also not Datacron specific, although her leadership Omicron does help, and her primary use, where you're going to get most of your mileage, is actually going to be against Jabba the Hutt. For that specific counter, I would recommend taking IPD out and B2 going in, just because that will allow for a more consistent dispel in addition to that buff immunity on Chrysanthemum. That really helps you get access to Boosh, and Boosh is very key to dying for this team to work. Darth Vader does add a lot here because, as I said before, Boosh needs to die, and his Merciless Massacre will actually allow him to get past that taunt, so that is also a great help. So overall, fantastic team on offense. Really wouldn't advise that people be putting on defense. A lot of the other teams or lower are actually going to be able to take it out. CLS being a really great example because Han can kind of just shoot Aphra first and then you can completely take over from there. Next up is going to be the Nightsister team. Nightsisters again are going to be able to beat a variety of teams that we are currently looking at in this tier. Notable examples being Fin Zori as well as actually CLS and Grievous droids. However, and this is, I've really only gotten good at this in 3v3. I'm pretty sure you can do it in 5v5 too. But it's also similar to Aphra, another outside counter to Jabba. A lot of it revolves around Marin and her Omicron, and really the rest of her team dying off so that she just gets 100% turn meter loops every single time there's a revive and a death, which due to Mother Talzin lead is pretty much happening every single turn, assuming all the allies are dead at that point in the battle. Next up is going to be CLS, and CLS is going to be a little bit more similar to Zori here in the sense that he doesn't typically get to punch up against the really large squads like Galactic Legends or like Inquisitors. He does have a small shot against Starkiller. I don't love that counter, but I realize that's something that a lot of people feel like they have to do because it's essentially necessary due to the constraints on the roster. That being said, he does tackle a lot of the teams that are also already on this list, like Finn, like Aphra, like General Skywalker. And I mean, one of the things that I probably like most about them, and this doesn't really have to do with this viability, but it's just a very accessible team, and really a team that almost everyone is going to pick up along the way as you progress with your farms, going after Jedi Master Luke, Jedi Luke, Leia, so on and so forth. Next up, I'm going to cheat just a little bit here when it comes to my best 10 B tier teams, and that's because this is technically one team, and what I mean by that is, for Rebel fighters to truly be effective, and they very much can be, you really have to choose between Mon Mothma and Saw. You can't really have a fantastic Mon Mothma team and a fantastic Saw team. You pretty much have to either go for two mediocre teams or one good team. That being said, Mon Mothma offensively definitely would fall into this category where, again, she has outside shots against both Leia and Lord Vader. It will require Luthen and Kyle Katarn, so that is very important. And those two characters specifically are also the ones that Saw really wants to have on defense. Without them, it can be beaten by a lot of lower tier teams. And quite frankly, even with them, CLS kind of has a shot against him depending on what datacrons are going around at the time. So you kind of have to pick and choose what you think is best for your overall roster and for your overall team. But either one of these options can be good. Next up is going to be General Grievous. Now, General Grievous is really exemplifying very well the concept that I talked about in the very beginning of the video, being a niche solution to a GL. When we look at taking down Jedi Master Luke on defense, if your opponent does that, Grievous, a really good Grievous, will beat a lot of Jedi Master Lukes, and he'll even beat some good ones. But when we compare it to an A-tier team, like, say, Reva, nothing really matters. Reva will beat any JML team regardless of how good it is, and quite frankly, she'll do so even if her team kinda sucks. Like, you can remove her leadership Omicron, you can take relic levels down, she's still going to be able to beat JML 95% of the time, I believe was the win rate I looked at before we made this video. Whereas General Grievous, you're going to have a better comp with the right modding, the right relics, the Omicron, all that stuff to be able to punch up. He can still do it, but at the same time, that's kind of the problem that he's left with. Stop does help a little bit if you have the Omicron with combating the Bad Batch counter, so that kind of helps isolate, again, a lower tier team. Next up is going to be Mandalorians. This team is actually kind of new to these types of lists that I make, because typically I don't allow it because Maul ends up being over there with Lord Vader. As you all probably know very well, Maul has been kicked off the Lord Vader team. That's actually very good news for Maul and us, I guess, because he can not only be used in the Seer team to a great extent, but it can also be used to lead the dark side Mandalorians, namely being Canderous, Gar Saxon, as well as the Imperial Super Commando. You can use Jango's 5th here. He's probably the ideal 5th, but one of the whole points of making this giant list of all the teams was to actually be able to make all the teams that the teams want, aka Trench needs Jango, so we have to use another 5th here. I chose Royal Guard just as a placeholder because since he's Empire, he won't completely shut down ISC's unique here, which is very important for getting Mandalorians to work, at least if you're going to be using dark side Mandalorians and leaving the light side ones to bow. Anyways, overall, can be really good. Just a lot of damage. The main counter that I like to use Maul on, and I actually referenced it in the beginning of the video, is against JMK. If you have Jango in there as a 5th, you actually can just let Cat completely leap him. He'll come right back. You'll have 5 stacks of Anguish, and then you pretty much just get to rip through the entire team because of the massive amount of damage that Gar Saxon and Imperial Super Commando do. I will say, this counter has become a little bit more difficult recently because everybody out there is running around with both an Ahsoka and a Cat at Relic 9 due to Ahsoka. This actually has made it quite a bit harder to chew through them, so just kind of check your Relic levels before you go in. As you can see here, I have an R5 Gar Saxon, R5 ISC. It's been a little bit difficult for me to be able to get past them. Back when everyone was just running R5s or R7s, it really wasn't hard at all. So I guess, you know, check yourself before you wreck yourself. So that is the top 10 B tier teams. One honorable mention is going to be the new Bad Batch squad. They're still very new and also just new to me. As you can see, the fact that I really don't have the team functioning. We haven't made a video about them. Once I really start to ramp up in the farming and I start to look at their modding, that video will come about how I think they should be used in their modding and whatnot. But right now, from what I can see, at least on Insight, as well as talking to my friends that actually have them built up, they do seem to be in this level where they're beating Queen Amidala really well. And I believe the other team, this is actually kind of shockingly enough, this actually might be what kills Traya on defense for me. It looks like they're beating Traya and Savage for pretty high consistent win rates. And that actually is notable because the whole reason that I like to put Traya on defense is while she's a powerhouse on offense, it almost always calls out a Galactic Legend, and that helps limit my opponent's roster. Sure, they did use C, but at the same time, now they can't use C Bane against something else. So that is going to be it for today, and eventually we will put all these into one master video where we'll rank all 50 teams or something gross like that. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Until the next time, stay awesome.